"Get out, right now, before I call the real police." The words landed like a slap across the face of every person standing in that lobby, and nobody moved, nobody said a thing. That was the moment Irene Osibansu decided she was going to remember everything. She had walked through the revolving door of the Harrington Grand at 11:47 in the morning. She knew the exact time because she had glanced at the clock above the concierge desk the moment she stepped inside. The lobby smelled the way old money always smells: cedar, leather, something faintly floral being pumped through the ventilation, the kind of scent that costs more per year than most people earn. She was wearing a gray linen blazer she'd had since her youngest started primary school, flat shoes that had been resoled twice, and a canvas tote bag with a cracked handle. Her hair was natural, pulled back simply. She was not wearing jewelry. She had not worn jewelry in years, not since the accident that took 3 fingers on her left hand and left her with the kind of scars that jewelry only drew attention to. She had not come to impress anyone. She had come because the Harrington Grand was the venue for the Canadian Bar Association's Regional Directors' Luncheon, which she had attended every year for the past 11 years, and which she was, as of this particular Thursday morning, scheduled to chair. But none of that had been visible to the man now standing 6 feet in front of her with his arms crossed and his chin raised. His name tag said Brett, security supervisor. He was perhaps 32 years old. He had the kind of jaw that suggested he had once played competitive something or other and had never entirely moved past it. He was looking at Irene the way people sometimes look at something left behind on a bus seat, not with cruelty exactly, just with the flat, uncurious certainty that it didn't belong there. "I said," Brett repeated, slower this time, like he was speaking to someone who hadn't understood the first time, "you need to leave the premises." Irene looked at him. She had spent 23 years as a federal judge. Before that, 7 years as a Crown prosecutor. Before that, 2 years articling in the coldest, smallest firm in Halifax, where she had been the only black woman in the building, and had been handed the files no one else wanted, and had won every single one of them. She had stood in rooms where people wanted her gone. She had become very, very good at being still. "I'm here for the CBA luncheon," she said. Her voice was even. "It's in the Rideau Room. I believe it begins at noon." Something shifted in Brett's face. Not doubt, not yet. More like mild irritation at being contradicted. "The Rideau Room is a private function," he said. "Yes," Irene said. "It is." She did not elaborate. This was a habit she had developed over decades, the deliberate, disciplined withholding of explanation to people who had not earned the right to one. It was not rudeness. It was the conservation of something she had learned was precious, the requirement that other people do their own work. Brett, however, was not interested in doing work. He took one step toward her, then another, and then, in front of the 12 people currently standing or sitting in the lobby of the Harrington Grand Hotel in Ottawa on a gray Thursday morning in October, he put his hand on her arm. "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me," he said. The touch was not violent. It was something almost worse, proprietary. The hand of a man who had decided she was a problem to be moved rather than a person to be spoken to. Irene looked down at his hand on her arm. Then she looked up at his face. She said nothing. She counted the security camera above the front desk, angled slightly left. A second one near the elevator bank, newer model, wider lens. A third she could see reflected in the mirror panel beside the concierge station. There were 4 hotel staff visible, 2 of whom had stopped what they were doing. A couple near the fireplace, both watching now. A woman at the desk with a phone held just slightly too still. A man in a blue coat by the window who had turned around. 13 people in this lobby. 3 cameras. 1 man with his hand on her arm who did not know who she was. This, Irene thought, was going to be a very educational afternoon for him. She allowed Brett to guide her, and she used the word allowed deliberately in her own mind because there was not one moment during which she did not have a choice. Toward the side exit near the coat check. The door opened onto a narrow internal corridor that smelled of cleaning product and old carpet. 2 potted plants flanked the entrance, a staff bathroom to the left, an emergency exit at the far end. Brett let go of her arm once the lobby door swung shut behind them. "Look," he said, and his voice had changed slightly. "Less performance now, more business. I don't know how you got the idea this was a public event, but the hotel is hosting several private functions today and we've had issues with." "With what?" Irene asked. He paused. With people coming in off the street, he said. Irene looked at him for a long moment. I came in through the front door, she said, like every other guest. I understand that, but what did I do, she asked. Specifically, what did I do that caused you to approach me? Brett's jaw tightened. It's not about what you did, it's about the nature of the event. You said the Rideau room is a private function. Correct. How did you determine I wasn't part of it? There it was. The question he hadn't prepared for, or rather, the question he had been hoping she wouldn't ask, because the answer was not one he could say out loud in the lobby of a hotel that had a diversity charter framed and mounted behind the front desk. The answer was the way she looked. The answer was the linen blazer, the canvas bag, the flat shoes, the hair, the skin, the absence of the particular kind of visible, legible affluence that Brett had been trained, formally or informally, it didn't matter, to treat as a passport. He didn't say any of that. What he said was, I'm following standard protocol. Is it standard protocol, Irene said, to physically remove guests from the lobby without first asking their name or verifying their registration? Another pause, longer this time. I didn't remove you, Brett said. I asked you to step aside. You put your hand on my arm and guided me to a service corridor, Irene said. In front of 13 guests and 3 cameras. The number landed. She could see it register. The specific number, the detail of it, the fact that she had counted. Brett straightened. If you have a registration confirmation, I'm happy to verify. You didn't ask me that in the lobby, Irene said. You told me to leave. Before I said a word, before I showed you anything, were you applying the same standard to every person who walked through that door this morning? Silence. The corridor was very quiet. Somewhere beyond the emergency exit, a delivery truck was backing up. 3 short beeps, a pause, 3 more. The fluorescent light above them buzzed slightly at irregular intervals. Brett said, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Yes, Irene said. There has been. She reached into her canvas tote bag. Brett watched her hand with the particular alertness of someone recalculating a situation faster than he would like to admit. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, her confirmation of attendance, printed that morning, because she had learned long ago that some rooms still preferred paper, and held it out to him without a word. He took it. He read it. His eyes moved to her name. Her title. The line that said Chairperson, CBA Ontario Regional Directors Luncheon, Rideau Room, 12 p.m. The line below that, which read the Honorable Irene Osei-Bonsu, Federal Court of Canada, Superior Court Division. The paper didn't shake in his hands, but it might as well have. He started. I'd like to return to the lobby now, Irene said. She turned and walked back toward the lobby door. She did not wait for him to open it. She pushed through it herself and emerged back into the cedar and leather air of the Harrington Grand. 12 of the 13 people from before were still there. The woman with the phone had not put it down. At the far end of the lobby, the elevator doors opened, and a group of 8 emerged. Lawyers, mostly, in the particular restrained wardrobe of people who spend their working lives in formal environments and know exactly how much that costs. 2 of them saw Irene immediately and changed direction. Irene, that was Malcolm Tran, who had clerked under her 12 years ago and now ran one of the most respected appellate practices in Ontario. He was grinning. We were wondering where you'd gotten to. I was detained, Irene said. Malcolm looked at her. He looked at the corridor door. He looked at Brett, who had followed her out and was now standing approximately 4 feet behind her, with the particular stillness of a man whose entire career was rearranging itself in real time. Everything all right? Malcolm asked. It will be, Irene said. She walked toward the Rideau room. The corridor that led to it was wide and carpeted, lined with framed photographs of every head of state who had stayed at the Harrington since 1987. Irene had walked this corridor before. She knew the photos. She had never counted them until today. There were 19, but she knew the corridor. Behind her, she could hear Malcolm say something quietly to someone, and then she heard nothing more from Brett. Inside the Rideau room, 63 members of the Canadian Bar Association's Ontario Regional Directors were waiting. There were place cards and water glasses, and the quiet preliminary noise of lawyers who have not yet been given a podium. A young woman near the door, early 20s, name tag reading Preethi, event coordinator, looked up when Irene entered and immediately came forward. Justice Osei-Bonsu, we've been ready for you. She glanced at the clock. It was 11:59, exactly on time, as always. "Thank you, Preeti," Irene said. She set her canvas tote bag down at the head of the table. She poured herself a glass of water from the pitcher already placed at her seat. She sat down and straightened the papers that had been arranged there, the agenda, the director's notes, the motion she would be presiding over regarding CBA's National Equity Committee expansion. Around her, the room settled. Chairs pulled in, phones put away. 63 people, some of the most senior legal minds in the province, quieted. At the door, a hotel staff member knocked twice and leaned in. His name tag said Oliver. He looked about 19 and extremely unsettled. "Ma'am," he said. "Excuse me." "Ma'am," the general manager asked me to. He wanted to personally. "Tell him I'll speak with him after the session," Irene said. Oliver nodded very quickly and withdrew. The door closed. Irene looked up at the room. "Good morning," she said. "Thank you for being here. Let's begin." What happened next? In the narrow service corridor, and then in the general manager's office, and then in a formal written complaint lodged with both the hotel's ownership group and the Hotel Association of Ontario, took several weeks to fully unfold. But the shape of it was clear from that first afternoon. The general manager's name was Colin Fairweather. He was a tall man in his mid-50s who had spent 30 years in hospitality management and had, by all accounts, never been called into a meeting quite like this one. He sat across from Irene in his own office, which she had entered at 2:14 p.m., directly after the luncheon concluded, and he had the expression of a man watching something structural give way slowly above his head. "Justice Osi Bonsu," he began, "I want to assure you that what occurred today in no way reflects the values of this establishment." "I'm not asking about your values," Irene said. "I'm asking about your protocol." Colin blinked. "When a member of your security team physically escorts a guest from your lobby without first verifying their purpose or identity," Irene said, "is that written protocol? Or is it discretionary?" There is a protocol, yes, but, and does that protocol specify the criteria by which a guest is identified as requiring removal?" A pause. "It's meant to be applied in situations where there is a clear. Does it specify those criteria in writing?" Silence. "I'd like a copy of it," Irene said. "The written protocol. Within 5 business days." Colin looked at her. "Of course," he said. "I'd also like the footage from the 3 lobby cameras during the period between 11:44 and 11:53 this morning preserved and not deleted. I'll have a formal request submitted by end of business today." Colin's throat moved. "I'll instruct the team. Thank you." Irene picked up her bag. "I understand that Brett, I believe his last name is Kowalski, has been with this hotel for 4 years. I'm not here to end anyone's career. I am here to make certain that the next woman who walks through that lobby in flat shoes and a linen blazer does not get walked into a service corridor before she's said a word." She stood. "I've eaten at this hotel 3 times in the past decade," she said. "The salmon is very good. I'd like to continue eating it." She left. The formal complaint was submitted. The hotel's protocol documents were reviewed. Brett Kowalski was not terminated. Irene had meant what she said about that, but he completed a mandatory course in equitable guest services, and the hotel revised its lobby security guidelines for the first time in 9 years. None of that made the news. It wasn't meant to. What did circulate quietly through the legal community in Ottawa and then Toronto and then further was the story itself, told first by Malcolm over dinner with 3 colleagues the following week, then by Preeti to her event management cohort, then by Oliver, who told his mother, who told her book club, and eventually it spread the way things spread when they carry a particular kind of weight. The story of the woman in the gray blazer, who stood in a service corridor and counted the cameras before she said another word. The story of the man who didn't read the room. Not the room he was standing in, but the kind of room Irene Osi Bonsu had been presiding over for more than 2 decades. There is something about a woman who doesn't explain herself to people who haven't earned the explanation. There's something that shifts in a lobby when 63 lawyers look up as one at the person who just walked in and take their seats. It's not power, exactly. Power is louder. It announces itself. It requires space. What Irene had was something quieter and, in the long run, more durable. She had the habit of remembering, the discipline of stillness, the understanding, earned slowly, over years, in rooms that hadn't wanted her, that dignity is not something someone else can authorize. Brett Kowalski had stood in front of her and made a decision about who she was before she had spoken a single word. She had let him make it, and then she had walked into the Rideau room and called the meeting to order. This is a story about what it costs to make that kind of assumption. Not always in the dramatic, career-ending way people expect from stories like this, but in the quiet, thorough way that stays with you, the way that makes you pause the next time, before you put your hand on someone's arm, the way that makes you wonder who you might be standing in front of. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been that woman in the gray blazer, or if you've witnessed someone be treated this way and said nothing, or if you just believe that the question of who belongs here should never be answered by the cut of a jacket, leave a comment below. Tell us what you think should have happened differently. Tell us what you think happened in that corridor before anyone said a word, because sometimes the most important moments in a story aren't the twist at the end, they're the silence right before. If you're new here, welcome to Velvet Honor. We tell the stories that deserve to be heard. Subscribe, and don't forget to share this one with someone who needs to see it today.